Resident Evil 4 Remake. I want to start off with the do I think it's good and do I think that you should play it? I think it's very good and I do recommend that you play it. I want to say that off the bat because I am going to be going into what I liked, what I disliked, and general criticisms of what I thought could be better. But I want you to know that whatever I say it's not bad enough that I wouldn't recommend you play the game. I think it's a really good remake and that the issues I had with it were minor compared to what I enjoyed. I want to start off with what makes a good remake in my eyes, and there's like three parts of a remake that I would say make it a good remake. A remake is it needs to have the same essence of the original. So if you remake a game, not reboot a game, rebooting would be different, but if you remake a game, it needs to feel like the original game, or it needs to feel like an updated version of that original game, which Resident Evil 4 Remake does very well. It needs to tighten up the story or rewrite parts that didn't quite work out. In Resident Evil 4's case, it does that with flying colors. The new story is a lot better than the original while still keeping some of that camp from the original, but it cut out some of the fluff. Like it had cut out a couple of boss fights. It cut out like the laser room from the original. It cut out the giant robot walking thing. And while those are like fun, memorable parts in terms of making the game more concise, and I don't know about making sense because the game is all a little bit nonsense regardless, but it fits that those were not in the remake and the story is a little more concise without them. And so because of all that, the Resident Evil 4 remake is really, really good in my opinion. It checks off like every list of what I'd want from a remake. The differences between the Resident Evil 4 remake versus the other ones is that this was already a 3D game before they remade it, where Resident Evil 2 and 3 were not top down, but like isometric locked camera ones. So with those, there was a little bit more of a reimagining of how the game plays, and I think that those remakes work a little better. 2 at least. 3 is not amazing, but I think 2 works a little bit better because with 4's redesign, they still have the issue that I had with the original in that it's very clearly trying to introduce action elements to gameplay that doesn't really fit with action gameplay because the gameplay is built around that sort of survival horror. You don't have to engage all the enemies. You have limited ammo. You need to make decisions of like not fighting enemies. But then in both the original Resident Evil 4 and the remake, there's just parts where they expect you to kill all the enemies in the area. And because of the randomized loot, you could either just get plenty of like assault rifle or SMG ammo to take everybody out real easy, or you could just be left with nothing like I was in many cases where I just end up with like some pitiful pistol ammo, and especially on the island near the end, that was a huge pain dealing with like a crowd of enemies with just my pistol because it was never giving me any other ammo, even though I would die over and over. At least in this one, they have checkpoints if you die. In the original, if you didn't save, you would go back to your very last save, and so it could be a lot more painful. That was another positive of the remake, is that they don't stick you to just the save slots. I don't know, maybe they do that on the harder difficulties, but not on the normal difficulty that I was playing on. The boss fights in general, didn't think they were very good. I understand they want to keep them more or less like the original, and so there were cases where the boss fights played very similarly to the original, like the lake monster or I can't remember the dude's name, the one with the trench coat and the hat and turns into a big scorpion man. Those boss fights were just not very interesting. The only good boss fights I would say were against the giant. I would say even the Krauser fight's not very fun either time, because the first time it's just like a parry fight, and then the second one is just like you have to go through like a maze to get to him, and then you have to do like a parry fight against his stupid grabs and stuff like that. And there's at least not as many quick time events as there was in the original. They said they were getting rid of quick time events entirely, but there are definitely still quick time events, especially related to if you get grabbed, you have to like mash your way out of it. At some point in the setting, I changed it to hold, but that is still a quick time event. There are also, I was finding myself forgetting that I could parry attacks. This is totally on me. This is not on the game. But when you need to dodge something, it reminds you that you have a crouch button. The dodge, like press crouch to dodge, is not actually a quick time event. It's just a button reminder, which is a little bit different because you can avoid an attack that would hit you like that by like running away. You don't have to complete the quick time event. But with a block, I kept forgetting that I could block attacks because there wasn't a button prompt for that. And so I was used to the game conditioning me that there were button prompts when I could do things. And I sort of forgot. I don't know if that's a problem anyone else has. That's probably just me being bad at the game. I really like all the character redesigns. I don't think there was a character redesign I didn't like, except for maybe like Ashley's hair, though if she had her original haircut in the remake, I don't think that would have looked good either. Ashley especially, I think, has the best glow up because she's at least 18 in the original. She's probably in her 20s because she's in college. And in the remake, she actually looks like she's in her 20s and not like a 12-year-old, because the original, she looked like she was very underage when she was not. I really liked the redesign of Ramon. I don't know why he was a goblin child in the original. Maybe that was something you could find out and I don't remember. But him being just like a short, creepy little man makes way more sense. Leon looks basically identical, which is good because that was sort of, and I know the word iconic is like overused, but Leon's look in Resident Evil 4 was iconic for the game, so keeping him nearly identical to the original just with like updated graphics was a good touch. The merchant, his updated design where when he opens his sleeve, it's like chock full of stuff, and he's also got like stuff on his body, where in the original he just had like 3 rows of some ammo, because you know the original was 2004, I want to say, and so there was only so much you could like render at a time. But with the new one, he's got the backpack on with all the gear, and he opens up his coat, and he's got all the gear there and on his body. So it's just he's chock full of stuff, and it's makes so much more sense. It's like, oh yes, he's the wandering merchant. He keeps all of his stuff on him at all times. That was such a good design update. There was the story changes they had made. I already touched on that a little bit, but they're so much stronger. Luis has a much better character arc in this. In the original, he didn't have a whole lot to do, and then he got stabbed by Sadler in the castle. But in this one, he sort of has his character arc of like, he wants to help out Leon and Ashley because he feels bad about the work that he did for Umbrella and the work that he did helping out the cult. And then he gets killed by Leon's mentor, which sort of sets up the mentor fight later to make that a little bit more impactful. And his like last line of like, do you believe people can change, is like, it's pretty sad. It was a really good character arc. Ashley, also in the remake, is way less annoying. She's still annoying, don't get me wrong. Like her screaming when she gets grabbed, or everybody's really breathy, especially Ashley. Like she'll constantly be out of breath and having this like kind of awkward breathing. I don't know what was up with that, but in general, she's much more like scared young adult that is trying to be helpful with Leon, but still isn't quite well adjusted, because how would you be if you were in this situation? But she's not just, in the original, Leon was like a huge sexist dickhead, and then she was just like annoying haha women bad joke, and that stuff is aged kind of poorly, and so that being changed to be more modern was a good change. I want to bring this up again. I brought this up in the cast. I don't understand why you can't cancel a reload on a weapon that you can load individual bullets into, like the shotgun, which I know are shells, not bullets, and the rifle. And I had gotten comments about like, oh, just weapon swap, that'll cancel it. Weapon swapping is not the same as being able to stop, you know? It's not an intentional design choice, because they wouldn't design it to be like, oh, if you want to stop doing that, you should just swap your weapon and swap back. Like that's stupid design, even if that was intentional. But the fact that you can't is still weird to me. I understand it kind of from a balance perspective, but from a making sense perspective, the whole point of having a weapon that you load individually is that you can stop when you need to and fire it. So if they didn't want you to be able to do that, maybe they should have just changed it to a magazine, or even a clip. Like they could add like a Garand or something. I don't know. Just change it up a little bit so it makes more sense that you can't cancel these reloads. That's probably mostly just me bitching about that, because I don't know, that's like the worst thing in the remake, which I guess if that's the worst thing, you know, it's a pretty good remake if that's all I have to bitch about. There was also, I brought this up in the cast, the UI element for the codec calls that they changed it to, where there's just like a rectangle in the middle of the screen, is kind of a weird choice, because in the originals it was as if they had some kind of communication device where Leon was talking to whoever on the other side. But in the remake, he's very clearly just like talking on a headset. And so there's no reason to have the people show up in the middle, besides the fact that that was a thing in the original and they wanted to keep it in the remake somehow. So logically, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't even think this is like a problem. This is just me just spewing that this doesn't make sense. I mean, is this bitching? I have no idea. But it's like, if they wanted to do something, and I know it's like, it's 2004 in the game. So like handheld video chatting wasn't really a thing, but it's also like a fantasy sci-fi game. So like in those sequences, because you're already slowed down and you can't interact with something, just have him like open up a little thing. I made a joke about it being a Farnsworth, which is from Warehouse 13, but that was that show's version of like video chat before video chat was a thing with phones. So you can just have like some device where you can see the person's face on it and just like zoom in the camera to like over Leon's shoulder so you can see like, and you like move the camera so you can see like the person and then Leon or something like that. You know, just make it make sense in the world. The way that it shows up in the game is supposed to be like a meta UI element, but it doesn't make sense because Leon doesn't see their face. So that was really all I have to say about that. Charles, you got here right at the end. Do you think it's a good remake, and do you recommend other people play it?
I'd say yeah to both, yeah. But also definitely play the original if you want the proper corny vibe.
If you're going to play the original, I would say, I mean, obviously it's probably hard to get like a GameCube to play it, but I think if you're going to play the original, like emulate it on a GameCube emulator. Don't play the PC port. The PC port's really fucked up and the PC controls are god awful. So just get a controller, play it on an emulator. That would probably work out a lot better than trying to play it on PC.
Came for the murder, stayed for the corny one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have one gripe with the game. The Leon voice actor, he kind of sounds like he has a gun pointed to his head sometimes.
I actually liked Leon's voice actor a lot. I thought, because in the original, he was kind of campy and like flat too. So I think they did a good job of like recapturing that original voice acting while sort of doing their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, example, the bingo line, doesn't sound quite right.
I don't know, I think it was pretty weird in the original too. My favorite line that they added in the remake was Luis. It's when you go to the house for the holdout section and Luis is like, "Oh, I see you found your missing senorita." And Ashley's like, "You know, she's got a name, you know, and it's Ashley." And he's like, "Great, I'm Luis." And Leon just goes, "Great, we all have names." It's like, I couldn't believe that wasn't in the original because that totally feels like it would have been. That was another thing about the changes in the story in this game. They got rid of some of the funnier lines like, "No thanks, bro." But I think that was necessary because Leon in this one still has some like campy lines and some teasing of the bosses, but he feels more like he actually cares about what's going on and isn't just so like nonchalant about the entire thing. And I think that's a positive where like Leon feels like he's invested in what's going on in the world because he should be. And it's the same with Ashley, like Ashley being more scared and less bitchy. It just fits more with the new story. There's still plenty of camp and there's still plenty of campy dialogue, like especially between Luis and, why did I forget Leon's name? All of a sudden I said it a moment ago. Yeah, there's still plenty of campy dialogue between Luis and Leon. One of the goofiest parts of the game is like Leon is going to grab this handle off of a wall and then the two chainsaw ladies stick their chainsaws into the wall. So his first reaction is to kick off the wall for a backflip instead of just crouching. But like that is the essence of the original, of just like Leon is an idiot. He's a competent idiot, but he is an idiot and he chose to backflip off this wall instead of doing something smart.
He's got style, though.
Yeah.
Speaking of a more campy dialogue, Mike, the helicopter guy, is really big change from the original.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of prefer it.
I liked Mike in this. One of the funniest ones, though, was, and I forgot to include this in the cast because I had made the joke while it happened, but then I forgot about it when I wrote my script. Mike is talking over like a megaphone so that Leon can hear him. But then they have a conversation at one point where Leon responds to Mike and then Mike responds to Leon as if Mike can hear Leon, but they're not talking over the headset. Like Mike is talking over that megaphone, so he should not have been able to hear Leon. I was really hoping that when it's shortly after Mike gets shot down and you like go and rescue Ashley and then Leon gets stopped by Sadler. Sadler gets shot to like break the concentration. And I was really hoping that it was just like Mike who survived the wreck somehow. I thought that would have been really funny. But it was just Ada.
This is a shame. I miss Mike.
Oh, I didn't talk about Ada's voice actress, actually. There was a ton of shit that actress got on social media that totally wasn't warranted. Like death threats, sexist stuff, racist stuff, like totally horrible. You shouldn't be sending an actress stuff like that. I say that, I always say, like, they didn't shoot your dog. Like, nobody deserves to be bullied for a role that they had in entertainment. But in this case, she just did a bad job. That's it. That's the criticism, is she wasn't good. That's pretty much as far as we need to take that. I think Ada's updated design in this is still just as ridiculous as it was in the original. In the original, she's wearing like a Chinese dress, and in this, she's got like a sweater and then like 6-inch heels. I think she had heels in the original too, but it's like, just give her boots, you know? I know the game's campy and that's sort of the whole thing, but just like, just give her boots. This is one game I would definitely, I want to play it again, and I want to play it on New Game Plus, but I also want to play it on like just a flat new game and play it a little bit differently than the way I did, because I think I might have just like been approaching a couple of situations wrong, especially with the fact that I wasn't parrying things consistently. That was totally on me. Also, the new side content stuff of like shoot the blue things, shoot the rats, whatever, that's total bullshit that they added with the remake. That's not good additions. I understand what they were trying to do about like trying to space the upgrades out and have you get them in a separate way or whatever, but that's just stupid. Adding inside content that wasn't there to lock old upgrades behind is, I don't like that at all, because it's just like, oh, let's have the player spend an arbitrary extra amount of time in this area looking for shit that they didn't have to do in the original to make them do that. I don't know. It's really dumb. And from what I played, like, I struggled near the end, but I think that was mostly on me and not because of the upgrades I had, because the weapons I had were totally fine. I just didn't have any ammo for them. So not doing the side missions didn't really shoot me in the foot as much as I thought it would have. So it doesn't really seem like you need to do them at all. I would also say I mentioned this a little bit, it was before you were here, but I don't think the shooting works as well in this, and I don't think it worked as well in the original.
Is it more like Resident Evil 3 and 2 remake?
Yeah, it's like the locked crosshair, sort of clunky, and it's like, because Resident Evil 4 is being more action focused than those others, it just doesn't work. I also think the animations for the weapons are not very good. There's a lot of them that were kind of strange, especially how Leon handles recoil. There's like, he has like a dinky little pistol, but he acts like he's never fired a pistol when he has like a crazy amount of recoil with it. For some of them it makes sense, like the kick on the revolver, that's fine, you can have a lot of kick on that. Or there's like the RPG, no game ever gets RPGs right. RPGs do not have recoil. They are a recoilless rifle or whatever, recoilless rocket launcher, whatever. And Resident Evil 4 has like the most recoil on the rocket launcher I've seen in a game, but it doesn't even make sense, because it's like, just don't have that happen.
I mean, as you said before, clampy, however you said it. Resident Evil 4, wacky game.
Yeah, wacky. Oh, this was a problem I had that I hadn't mentioned. The base movement speed of the walking is too slow, and when you start to sprint, there's a bit of a stick before you start sprinting, and that doesn't feel good. And then sprinting feels maybe a little fast in some cases, especially if you're running around indoors. So you end up at this case of like, you're running around indoors and you're taking corners and you're like getting stuck on geometry. So you go back to walking and then you stick as you go back to sprinting, and it just ends up with this like really annoying movement to get around indoors. It's not so much a problem outdoors, but because a lot of the later stuff was indoors, it was starting to wear on my nerves. And I think if they had just upped the base movement speed a little bit, that wouldn't have been a problem. There's also, I don't think the original game had sorting for your inventory, like auto sorting, and that is like the best new thing. I don't remember if Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake had those. I'm assuming it did, but auto sorting saved my life, because I remember playing the originals and like trying to sort everything manually. It's like, all right, where can I make like 2 things so I can put this fish in? Like, yes, it was really annoying, and so that auto sorting is much nicer. Also, the weapon wheel to quick swap weapons, where you can have like 2 weapons per wheel location. That's so much better than having to open up your inventory every time. It's so much faster, and you can like see the weapons that you have equipped visually on Leon, which is cool.
Oh, I always love when games actually show the physical stuff. It's gives a sense of immersion.
That's what I love about Risk of Rain. By the end of a Risk of Rain run, you can just be covered in the items that you picked up. That like no other game does that.
Covered in bungus.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what game they decide to remake next, because it seems people want them to remake remake Code Veronica, which is the Jill story that happens during the events of 4. And it seems like they're going to be probably going to be doing the Separate Ways DLC for 4. And then it's going to be interesting to see if they remake 5 and 6, because I think, and they've been doing it slowly. They've been like redoing the games in bits that didn't work with the originals while still keeping the essence of the games. But I think if they're going to do 5 and 6, I think they need to like reboot it, where they need to like make them more like the originals and just don't try and keep the original essence of 5 and 6, because what they did with 5 and 6 was bad and just not Resident Evil.
I've never touched any media outside of 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, you've some of them are good. There was like a DS game, Resident Evil, that was really good. That was, I think it was a remake of one of the early ones. I can't remember, but that was pretty good because it played like Resident Evil 4, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was like on a boat or something like that. Somebody will know. Somebody in the comments will know. They'll know what I'm talking about. It also, Resident Evil 4 makes me want to shit on Dead Space. I know I didn't want to bring up Dead Space in the real thoughts until the end, but I just want to talk about, after playing Resident Evil 4 again, it really makes me feel like Dead Space, just because Dead Space is sci-fi Resident Evil 4, but it's just worse. And in terms of remakes, the Dead Space remake is a great remake because it has all the hallmarks of what I said a good remake was. Like, it recaptures the essence of the original, it updates the story to make it more concise and fit with the rest, and it updates the controls and things to be more modern standards, and it removes like problem areas without changing the essence of the game. But the problem is Dead Space still sucks, and because Resident Evil 4, or just Resident Evil in general, is so much better about like making conscious choices about whether or not you want to fight the enemies.
And Dead Space, you don't really have that decision, do you?
No, you have to fight all the enemies in Dead Space, unless you're like running through rooms somehow. But like you have to fight all the enemies. They both, Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space, both sure share shitty boss fights. They have a bunch of them. But I just think Resident Evil 4 does all their stuff better that Dead Space doesn't. I think even the inventory system, like Dead Space just has inventory slots where it's like, oh, you have 15 inventory slots, everything takes up 1. Where Resident Evil has like the suitcase, and like certain like weapons take up more slots than other things, and blah blah blah. Where like if Dead Space were actually Resident Evil 4 but in space, it would have been a much better game in my eyes. And I know there are Dead Space fans that are going to be like, they don't agree with that opinion. Totally fine. You can have your own opinion about Dead Space. I just don't agree with that.
That's got me thinking. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't do anything with the size of the guns. You just have a fucking force gun in your back pocket, and it's just 1 slot.
But I'm interested to see where they go next. Also, Resident Evil 9. I'm also interested to see what they're going to call Resident Evil 9, because it was like with Resident Evil 7.
9?
Yeah, because 8.
There was an 8?
Yeah, Village.
No.
And it was like with 7, they hid the 7 like VII in the name, in the title, and then with 8 it was a little more forced because they hid the 8 in Village, like VIII. But with 9, IX, I'm interested to see if they're still going to try and hide it in the title somewhere, and it's just going to have like a really stupid word to like fit IX in the title somewhere.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, I do need to go, and I haven't played 8 yet. I enjoyed 7, because 7 was where Resident Evil started getting back on track, because it was like 7 was back to the more classic stuff. They realized that works so much better than 5 and 6. Then they did the remakes, because I think the remake of 2 was after 7, right? I'm not positive.
Yeah, it was. And then there was RE3 and then Village.
If they remade 5 and 6 to be more like 4 and 7, that would fit the series a whole lot better. And then they can do 9 next, and we'll have some new thing. Like, it'll also be funny to see if they try and one up Lady Dimitrescu as like the new internet thirst trap.
How do you? Can you even one up it?
Right? The funniest part is like, she's not even in the game for very long. She's in the game for like a fourth. She's only at the beginning, and then you kill her in her boss fight against the dragon, and that's it.
It's very short.
It's very funny. I've watched a playthrough of it. I just haven't played it, but I think I would really enjoy that. I also really want to try I think Resident Evil 7 or 8 has VR. I think that'll be really cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ooh.
Get your hand chopped off in VR.
Yeah. Also, this has nothing to do with Resident Evil, but I wanna rant really quickly about the stupid naming conventions for remasters and things. So it's like, if you're going to reboot a series, don't name the game the same as the original. And also, if you're going to create a continuation of a game series, don't name your game the same as the original. I'm looking at you, fucking God of War and Doom. Doom 2016 is sort of a spiritual successor to the originals, but like it follows some of the plots of like Doom 64. So just calling it Doom, everybody calls it Doom 2016. Nobody just calls it Doom, because if you call it Doom, nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about. It's the same with God of War. People just call it God of War 4 because it's God of War 4. I get the whole removing the number from the title to make sure that people don't think like, if you put out a God of War 4, people would be like, oh, I would have to play the first 3 before I pick this up. But like, give it a fucking subtitle. Just call it like God of War Norse. That's really stupid, but something else. But just calling it God of War, you have to call it God of War 4 or the God of War 2016 or whatever. It's really stupid, just because that one's not actually a reboot. That's another spiritual successor. Or like the Resident Evils have been fine about it. They just call it Resident Evil 4 Remake. You know exactly what you're getting into. The Dead Space remake? It's called fucking Dead Space. Call it Dead Space Remake. Just add remake to the title. Don't call it Dead Space.
Hitman did the same thing. You get a Hitman 2, and then you had Hitman 2.
Yeah, and that one's even more confusing because the original Hitman 2 was like the Sniper Assassin. That's what it was. Hitman 2 Sniper Assassin. And then they added Sniper Assassin into the new Hitmans. So it's like, if you say Hitman 2 Sniper Assassin, are you talking about the original Hitman 2? Or are you talking about Sniper Assassin in Hitman 2 the remake? It's like, ah! It's like, Jesus Christ. And then there's so many games where it's like remaster. There's no definition of like what a remaster should entail. So there are some remasters where it's like literally all they did was make it playable on new hardware. They didn't update the graphics, they didn't update the controls, they didn't update whatever. It's literally just playable on current hardware. Does that count as a remaster? I don't know. Kinda. Is it less of a remaster than a game that like updates the graphics to be sharper and things like that and tries to make it look a little bit more modernized without really changing a whole lot? And then there's some remasters where they just like fuck up the original art style and stuff like that. There's been some terrible remasters. Halo. But yeah, the Halo CE remaster, man, it's just bad. I just think if you're gonna do something like what Halo CE did, just remake it. I especially think Halo CE of all the Halos needs a remake because that was before they had all the lore in. So if they're going to remake a Halo, remake CE and then fit it with 2 and 3. There's some really shitty dialogue in Halo CE, especially from Cortana. They were just like, oh yeah, we're gonna make Cortana British and we're gonna get a British voice actress. And then they hired Jen Taylor and they were like, okay, so she's not a British voice actress, but Cortana is still going to have like British sayings. So it's just like, ah, yes, Jen Taylor, sod off. Also, like, Cortana's a huge dick to Chief in the original, where she's not in any of the others, and like that's why CE needs like to have a remake. And I think there's a lot of people who vilify remakes as like they're not necessary for things, but it's like the originals still exist. And I think in a perfect world, if you're going to remake something or remaster something, I guess remastering would be the original, but if you're going to remake something, also update the original version of it to be playable on modern hardware. That way, so it's like, let's say Halo CE remastered never happened. So they do a Halo CE remake, but then they also have like Halo CE HD. So it's just like the original game in its purest form, playable on modern hardware, that you get for free with the Halo CE remake. That seems fair to me. That way you get to experience both. That way it feels like they're not trying to like erase the original. They're like, hey, the original was like this. Here's the remake. I don't know how people feel about that whole thing. I know Racevic would be foaming at the mouth. I've talked to him about his opinion on like remakes and things, and he's not like fully against remakes. He just has some opinions that don't match up with mine about what things deserve remakes and what don't need to be touched. Anyways, that's my rant about remakes and how naming. I mean, we've ranted about name conventions and games before, but it's all stupid. There needs to be some like universally accepted definitions for things. And then there's like the worst names of like Kingdom Hearts 1.5 Final Mix. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? Guess that's all we have to say. Right, Charles? I think Charles fell asleep on me. Charles. Okay, well, I guess he's gone, so that's where we'll call it.